Stalker at the grocery store. When I was 17, I started working at my local grocery store. About 3 weeks in, I got transferred from the front end to produce. My first week in produce, I met all the people in my department, and all was going well. One night, on my second week in, I was closing alone when this girl comes in. My back turned to her, I hear, "You're new. When did you start?" I turn around and we start to have a conversation while I put the last few things from my cart on the shelf. I had about 10 minutes left on my shift, and I was trying to go downstairs to crush my boxes, but this girl continued to talk and took no social cues that I was trying to leave. I finally get tired of listening to her talk and start to pull my cart through the produce section as she slowly follows, still talking. Eventually we get to the doors, and I start to make my way through and she comes right in after me. I explain that unfortunately she can't come this way and she needs to just check out as our store was closing soon. She said bye and leaves, and I thought it was odd, but maybe she's just a bit weird. Crush my boxes, go home, and don't think about it. 2 days later, the same thing happens. This time she asked for my phone number. I explained that I don't have a phone at this time, hence why I had a job so I could get one. "Okay, well, would you want to hang out when you get off?" I felt kind of bad at this point, as I thought she was just a bit odd and just looking for friends. I tell her maybe next time, as my mom was picking me up. So every night I worked, she would come in and just pick up one grapefruit and then just walk around, basically acting like she was either on the phone or pretending to shop, and just casually stop by me. It got old really quick, to the point where I would just hide in the hallway and watch her till she left. Eventually other people in my store heard about her, and rumors went around that she was stalking me. The deli manager explained that she and her boyfriend, who also worked in the deli, also had been stalked by her for a number of months. Eventually she stopped coming by at night, as I was always hiding when she did come. A few weeks go by, and I had just gotten off work, early shift for a change, and my friends were meeting me at work to hang out after. So I head out to the parking lot and meet up with them, when my stalker comes out of nowhere and hugs me. "I haven't seen you at work in so long." Oh yeah, they switched my hours, so now I don't work late anymore. Well, one thing leads to another, and my friend, female, starts to talk to her and basically invites her to hang out with us. She jumps on the opportunity after I explained to my friend that she was stalking me, and so we all start walking back to my friend's house to hang out in the backyard, as it was a nice summer's night. The night wasn't bad. We all just hung out, and I kinda avoided the stalker while my friend kept her entertained. The night came on pretty fast, and eventually it was 1 a.m., and my friend's mom came out and told us we had to leave. Me and my 2 guy friends and the stalker head out, and we're waiting at the bus stop that my friend needed to catch, when the stalker explains that she can't go home this late and that she needed to stay over. So I beg my other friend to stay with me, which he agrees. We wait for the bus to pick up my other friend and head to my house. Things got super weird at this point. So basically, the stalker refused to sleep on the floor and only wanted to sleep in bed with me. I eventually grew up and said okay, while my friend slept on the floor. So I'm laying in bed, and this girl stands up and just takes off her bra and shirt and then her pants and gets in bed with me. At first, I was pretty dumbfounded and didn't know what to do, so I acted like I didn't notice. And then, she started trying to kiss me and have me grope her. At this point, I realized that this girl had issues. I don't know if they were mental or just social, but I didn't want to find out. I lightly pushed her off me and explained I'm trying to sleep, but she wouldn't take the hint and kept insisting that we cuddle. I was getting fed up, and so eventually I wake up my friend. Pretty sure he wasn't asleep at this point. "Nathan, are you asleep?" He sits up. "No, why?" So she covers up with the blanket so he doesn't have to see her naked. And then I basically explained that I wanted to go for a walk. So I have Nathan leave the room so she can get dressed, so we could go for a walk. On our way out, I tell Nathan to get his bike. We walk outside at this point. It's almost 3:30 a.m. Me and Nathan are walking with our bikes and the girl beside us. I'm thinking of ways we can get rid of this girl. At first, I suggest me and Nathan just take a walk in the alley and go pee, but she says she's scared and wants to go with us. Eventually, while walking and talking, she says how she was on track in high school. "Oh, you run track? I bet you can't beat us to the end of the block." At this point, Nathan looks at me and smirks, as he knows we're about to ditch this girl. For it to be 3:30 a.m., this girl was pretty excited as hell to go sprinting. She takes off running for the end of the block and we take off in the opposite direction, back towards my house. We rush back inside and hide our bikes in the house instead of the porch, and go to the living room making sure to not turn on any lights. We sit in the living room and talk about how crazy this chick is when she starts banging on my door. We stayed quiet for what seemed like 2 or 3 hours of her just banging on the door, talking to herself, banging on the door and then doing more talking to herself. Eventually, we heard the downstairs door open, and we watched her leave. I lived on the second floor of an apartment building, and my mom was out of town. So the next few days I go to work, and I don't see her, which is good. Then about a week later, she comes in and completely ignores me. She gets her random grapefruit and pretends to shop while me and my coworker are talking. She's wearing a backpack this time, and she just walks right in between me and my coworker. We were maybe 6 feet apart. She turns to walk away, and her backpack touches something on my flat cart. She turns around and starts screaming and throws all the boxes off my cart. She starts saying that I grabbed her and she wanted to talk to the manager, so my coworker tells me to go downstairs and to get away from the situation. I head downstairs and sit in the break room. About 10 minutes later, I'm called up to the hallway where my store manager is talking to the girl. I see her from the door that she leaves, and then he comes into the hallway to talk to me. So that girl says you grabbed her and shoved her and that you were swearing at her. I explain what happened to my manager, and he goes and finds my coworker and then comes back to me after talking to him. My manager comes in and looks at me. "You need to sleep with her already." We kind of chuckle, and then he tells me not to worry about it and she's just crazy. Eventually she left me alone, but then my girlfriend started working with me, and the girl would come in and see me and my girlfriend, and then go back to her line to check out, and was always really rude to my girlfriend. Eventually she stopped coming around altogether, and from the looks of it, she's married to some 50-year-old man on Facebook. She's 24. Creepy stalker girl, let's not meet. Landlords from hell. When I was in my early 20s and living in Chicago, I wasn't making much money. When I found this apartment, it was too good to be true. The top floor was a duplex with 6 rooms for $775 a month. The agent who showed me the apartment stressed to me that the landlords were very religious. I didn't have a problem with that, even if it did sound a little ominous. The landlords were an elderly couple that lived downstairs. They seemed okay at first. When I saw them in the yard, they would smile at me. They took good care of the house. Then, when they saw I started having my boyfriend over, things started to get really weird. One day I was in my office writing. I heard a knock at the door. I open it and it's the old lady from downstairs. Before I can say hello, she says, "Have you ever gotten an abortion?" I shut the door in her face. No thanks. This was a colossal mistake. The house was laid out kind of weird. There was a door at the bottom of the flight of stairs that I thought led to a communal laundry room, but after accidentally opening it once, I discovered it led directly into my landlord's living room. Unfortunately, I learned this the hard way. I was in my kitchen cooking. My boyfriend was at work and I was by myself when I heard what sounded like the click of a door. "Okay," I say out loud. What the fuck was that? I really didn't make the connection that it could have been the door that led into their living room. I walk into the hallway and look around. I don't really see anyone at the end of the hallway. I poke my head into all the rooms, nobody there. Then I look down the staircase leading to their house, and the neighbor lady is standing there staring me down. I screamed. She flinched and stepped back into her apartment and swung the door shut. After that, every time I left the house, and I spent every single possible moment out of the house after that incident, I would come back and something would have been moved. A window would be shut. Once the shower was dripping and my towel was damp. I couldn't lock the door because since it was technically a door to their house, they were the only ones with the key. Their knocking got so frequent that me and my boyfriend propped up an old mattress so that we wouldn't have to hear it while we slept. The second to last straw was when I opened the door for work, and the stairs were gone. I physically could not leave the house because there were no stairs. They had been dismantled and were sitting on the porch. I called them repeatedly, but they didn't answer. Finally, their son came out of the house and explained that they were remodeling the porch. He told me that I had to cut through their apartment downstairs. I descended the stairs and opened the door, and they were both sitting at their filthy kitchen table staring at me. The phone was in its cradle. They must have heard it ringing. They kept staring at me with this blank look on their faces. I crossed their kitchen and left out their back door. A few days later, I came home from my job and noticed the bathroom floor was almost completely flooded, like somebody left the faucet or the shower on. The old woman, seeing that I had come home, came upstairs and knocked, screaming at me that I had flooded the bathroom and that her son had come to fix it. I was so run down at this point that I just told her it was okay. Her son comes by a few hours later. He's shit-faced. I open the door and tell him that I need an hour or so before he comes, and he picks something up and swings it at me. It's a massive wrench. I somehow duck out of the way and he stumbles over. I book it down the newly repaired stairs as quickly as possible, and I call the police. They come by and take down the complaint, but claim that since there is no physical damage, they can't do anything. I later learned that the old couple has a daughter on the force. In the middle of the night, me and my boyfriend and several of his friends packed all of our stuff into a Chevy Astro. We lived in hotels in a van for a month, until we found another house. They never attempted to contact us again. Old landlords, let's not meet again. Watched and stalked for hours by someone that turned out to be more dangerous than I thought. This took place when I worked at a local Walmart about 5 or 6 years ago. I was 21 at the time and had already been working for Walmart for more than a year. So I had my share of experiences with questionable and sometimes pretty scary customers. But there was one customer who burned into my memory that I'll never forget and probably changed my life forever. It was a weekday, so it was fairly slow. I was working alone in the girls' clothing department and focusing on tidying up my area, folding clothes, organizing hangers by size, etc. I had only been about 30 minutes into my shift when a gentleman began passing by me and started to slow down. I saw in my peripheral vision that he was looking in my direction, so I looked over expecting him to have a question. What I instead got was him saying, through a painfully wide grin, was, "Hey baby," followed by a kiss blown in my direction. I furrowed my brow and pursed my lips in confusion, unsure whether he was just trying to be funny or was truly that god-awful at wooing women. He made his kissy face for what was probably a full minute, and while I studied him awkwardly, I couldn't help but realize that his sense of style seemed to be very heavily influenced by that guy Pauly D from Jersey Shore. Same hairstyle, clothing style, the whole shebang. It was actually kind of amusing. After blowing his puckered kisses, he moved along, and I continued my work. For the next hour, I saw him pass by many more times, at least 6 or 7 that I could count when I was actually paying attention. And the first 2 times he did the same thing, calling me baby and blowing his kisses. It started to get obnoxious after the 3rd time, so I moved further into my department and faced the opposite direction when I saw him passing. He responded by changing his path and was now walking directly through the neighboring clothing sections, and was slowly getting closer and closer with each passing, as if he were circling in like a shark around my figurative boat. The longer he circled, the more my gut clenched. Eventually, he directly approached me. He reached out and lightly caressed my hair from behind me, and held it in his fingers for a couple seconds. I had very short hair, so he wasn't right up in my face with his hand or anything, but still. I turned around and see him holding my hair, and I took it back into my hands, wide-eyed. "You have very beautiful hair. You're so beautiful." "Thank you?" I didn't want to snap due to fear of getting myself in trouble. And plus, since I was deeper into my department, there weren't exactly a lot of other people around that could see me anymore, and I didn't want to set him off if I got an attitude. I started to slightly shake with mild anxiety, and I felt my face getting hot as my blood pressure rose. My gut was screaming at me that something was seriously wrong with this guy. Again, he carried on without saying another word, but he winked and blew another kiss. It was then that I realized that the car he had with him only had 2 items in it, so he had been circling my area for more than an hour, and most likely wasn't even truly shopping. I decided this was a good opportunity to take a break, and I ran off to hide in the break room for the usual 15 minutes I was given. While I was there, I saw my coworker and good friend come in, and I told him briefly what was going on. Mainly just that the guy had been circling around me and calling me baby, but that was all I could squeeze in before I had to go back to my post. He expressed that he found it creepy and he told me he was due to clock in a couple hours, so he'd check up on me on his way out to see if the guy lets up. 2 hours seemed like more than enough time for him to leave, right? I mean, maybe he was already gone since I wasn't in my department for those 15 minutes anyway. Well, I didn't necessarily see him. I kept looking over my shoulder expecting him to come from behind me. Even kept my hair over my shoulder in front of me so it wasn't flowing down my back anymore. And I became more and more paranoid as it started to sink in that this complete stranger had just made physical contact with me in a way that I wasn't comfortable with, and I wasn't sure if he would do it again or do worse. The unknown was frightening. I kept working in this anxious state as I made my way over to the girls' jeans shelves and began removing wadded piles of jeans to fold. That's when I saw him again. He was behind the shelves, watching me from there for God knows how long. I mean, an hour and a half is a long time if not physically seeing him. But realizing he had never actually left the store like I had hoped was enough to make me queasy. When I saw him, I let out a short gasp, dropped the jeans, and backed up with my hands to my chest. He gave me a shit-eating grin with a slight chuckle. He walks around the shelves and asks, "Did I scare you?" "Yeah. In fact, you did." He heard the fear in my voice this time, and I'm certain he did too. He apologized, but he didn't leave. He instead asked me questions he had no business asking. I gave every one with a vague or sarcastic answer. "What time do you get off work?" "Not soon enough." "Where do you live?" "Not around here." "Do you like to hang out anywhere after work?" "Anywhere that's with my boyfriend." "How long have you been with your boyfriend?" "A long time." Eventually he realized that I wasn't giving him the desired information he wanted, so I moved along once more, but this time saying he'd be back later. I took out my phone to check the time after this, and that's when everything had dawned on how much worse this was than I initially thought. He had been here for almost 3.5 hours. Not only was this dedication scary enough, but what was worse was I was only working a half day, meaning my shift was over in less than an hour, and I was truly and utterly afraid he was going to follow me to my car, or worse, home. As I looked at my phone in horror, almost as if I physically called him, Chris came back after clocking out as he promised. My face was bright red, and I felt as though I was going to have a panic attack. I told Chris that the man was still here, and he was getting worse. I told him everything as fast and as quietly as I could in case Polly Wannabe came back before I could finish. "Chris, I don't know what to do. He's circling me like a shark and was watching me from behind the shelves. He's asking me a bunch of questions I don't want to answer, and he's wondering what time I get off work. Chris, he fucking touched and caressed my hair. I don't know what to do. I have 30 minutes left on the shift, and I don't know what this guy is capable of or what he's planning. I don't even know this guy's name, and I'm scared I don't know what the fuck to do." Chris asked which way the guy went so he could see him for a description, and I told him that if he waited a few minutes, he would come back on his own. So he did, and he tried to distract me with a normal conversation to calm me down. And about 5 minutes in, here he comes. I told Chris to act normal and let him know that the guy was coming up on my right. We kept holding our conversation and Chris casually glanced over. I held a fake smile for a moment, as though our conversation was going ever so well, and I looked over with my eyes. Polly Wannabe was glaring at Chris, daggers that could cut thin air locked in his direction, turning his head as he passed by. Chris played dumb as though he didn't notice, and said out loud that he was going to grab his stuff and turned to head back towards the back room, despite the fact that he was on his way out the door. After Chris left, my creepy admirer came right back to me as though he were waiting for that, bumping me slightly with his cart, asking if that was my boyfriend. I told him that he wasn't, although I probably should have lied now that I think about it. He began asking if I could get him a job there, and started asking me more questions about what I usually do. Again, I gave vague answers, not that it would do much good, because no matter where exactly I am at work, I'm still somewhere in the building that could be found rather easily. As he's holding the Q&A, I see 2 managers walking into the department as Chris passes by giving me a reassuring nod that Polly D Wannabe didn't see. The managers just stood there, watching us. I looked over to them with a cry for help in my eyes, and they inched closer. The creeper took notice and turned to me, silent for a moment. "Am I getting you in trouble?" The last words I spoke to him were, "It's not me that's about to get in trouble." The jig was up. He left this card that still had the same 2 items in it, and power walked out of the store. The managers came up to me and asked if he was bothering me. I told them everything. The shark circling, the watching from behind the shelves, the uncomfortable questions, the hair touching, everything. I topped it off with the fact that it went on for what was now almost 4 hours. They told me that they would check the cameras to see if they could get a good shot of his face, so security could keep a record of the incidents in case he returned. They then asked the other managers to walk me to the car after my shift, and to wait until I pulled out of the lot before returning indoors to make sure I wasn't obviously being followed. I made it home safely and without issues, but the fear still lingered. I could never return to work without the paranoia again. I worked there for a little more than another year, and he never ended up coming back. But I never forgot him. I kept constantly looking over my shoulder while I worked in fear that he would return, and any time the fear began to disperse, I had nightmares that would remind me of him. Those nightmares came and went up until about 2 years ago. Even though I know the situation wasn't as bad as it could have been, my overthinking and anxiety kept repeating what if, and making me think about what he possibly could have planned had he succeeded sticking around until I left that day. It affected my ability to go anywhere in public alone, even to this day. After the nightmares finally stopped, however, I was in for a surprise that I may have not been overthinking things as much as I thought, that my gut feelings were correct. His mugshot showed up in my newsfeed on July of 2017. The local sheriff's office was looking for him and found him shortly after. He was wanted for stalking, exposing himself to women, masturbating in front of a store where he was watching women work through the window, grabbing a woman's breast, and grabbing a woman between the legs. He pleaded no contest to the charges. As I looked at his mugshot in disbelief, I took the opportunity, now having his name, to look into his criminal history. On top of the most recent charges I just listed, he had been arrested for many counts of different types of battery on people, of many different ages, and at least one of them included him being armed. But the charge that hit me the hardest was about a year before the encounter with him. He was charged with kidnapping. Whether or not something of that nature was what he had planned for me, I may never know, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I consider myself very fortunate that it didn't have to be as bad as the poor souls he was able to get his hands on, thanks to Chris and the managers that watched over me. Why this man was able to walk free for so long despite his consistent disgusting actions is a mystery, and I don't know what his sentencing was last July. But if the justice system lets him roam once more, all I can say is, I hope we never meet again. I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case. I apologize in advance, since I'm not a good writer, but I'll do my best to share my experience. To better paint the picture, here's a description of myself at the time of this incident. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium length with bleach blonde hair, curvy 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I've gotten myself out of, so I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings for my own safety just in case. About halfway home, and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I noticed a van started tailing me. I was used to this since in my city, it's common for a young woman in a rough area to get propositioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did the usual and crossed the road so I would be walking beside the traffic heading in another direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van turned down the side street and back onto the road I was on, and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times that it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped up just below my chin, all the way down to my ankles. This area is notorious for this type of activity. I decided to be firm and told the person sternly, "I'm not interested." I noticed that there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical and may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very, very dark complexion, dark eyes, and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured it would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone. So this was when I started to feel unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed the traffic was flowing in, and I yelled at them to fuck off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought it was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I live with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door, and he approached me quickly in an aggressive manner, as if he was about to scoop me up and throw me into the vehicle. The traffic in the area was very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagined that this is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You're being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was bluffing or telling the truth, so I tilted the phone more as if to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime. Stay safe out there. 2 creeps in a van. Let's not ever meet. I hope karma finds you both soon.